All right, welcome to demo number one for project number one for drawing. We are going to be doing self-portraits. We're going to be using charcoal, and we're also going to be using the grid transfer technique to give us a good sense of proportion to be able to create realistic portraits. So in order to transfer, you're going to be transferring from a photograph of yourself to a larger piece of drawing paper that you'll be drawing on. So you need to start with a photograph of yourself. Now I've posted some of the requirements on your assignment sheet about what makes a good photograph to draw from. So make sure you read those. But you'll notice a couple things. So first off here, let's just start by saying this is not a great photograph as far as photographs go. But that's okay. I think it's actually going to make a good photograph it's actually going to make a good drawing. And that's what we care about. So what are the things that will make it a good drawing? Well, number one, I've got this interesting sense of light to dark in my face. So I've got like a light side of my face and a darker side of my face. And I've tried to edit it to emphasize that a little bit without like completely making this light and like pure white and without making this pure black. But what that does is it creates more of like a form of like three-dimensionality in your face and will help you when you're drawing to get some of your features looking a little more realistic. So that's kind of the main thing that I'm looking for. I'm also looking, so I cropped it so that my head fills the paper. So you can see a little bit of my shoulders, but there's like maybe an inch on either side. My head is filling the paper. If I had longer hair, it's totally okay to crop out your hair. The reason for this is it's actually easier to draw your face and get the features right if you're drawing them big. So we want the head to be as big as possible so that on your drawing it's as big as possible. Some things that you'll notice about this photograph that aren't good, one of them is this weird background where I've got this like light part in this side and dark part on that side. Again, that makes a bad photograph, but it doesn't really matter with drawing because you have complete control over your drawing. So you'll be able to change that later on and you'll be able to adjust what the background looks like. Another thing is this is kind of a fuzzy photograph. It's not completely in perfect focus. I had my husband take the photograph. He's not a professional photographer, but this is actually can be a good thing as long as it's not like super blurry or fuzzy. But when you're drawing, you don't actually want to get caught up in the tiny details and tiny imperfections of your face. So a slightly fuzzy photograph, if you happen to have one, won't be a big deal and will actually help you kind of ignore those things that you really do want to ignore in a drawing. So pick a photograph that has that good sense of light and dark, has maybe a pose or expression that you like. I want to see the face in this. You don't have to look at the camera, but you can look at the camera. That can create a fun sense of kind of dialogue between the portrait and the person who's viewing it. Okay. So to get started for the grid technique, we need to grid this photograph. I'm going to use a red pen because I actually like the grid to stand out from the black and white of the photo. I could use a pencil, I could use a black pen, it doesn't really matter. The trick with using a pen is you want to be confident in how you're gridding, so if you're not feeling confident in doing the gridding thing, either print off a couple options, print off a couple copies of your photograph or use a pencil that you can erase. We want to do a 1-inch grid on the photo. So I'm just going to start by going across the top and making tick marks every 1 inch. And I'm going to do that across the bottom too, and I'm going to do it across the sides. One of the things that I want to do is you'll notice there's like a space where the paper is and where the photograph starts. So I want to make my grid starting where the photograph starts, not where the paper starts. So I'm going to do every inch. And then I'm going to do that again at the bottom. And again, I'm starting. So what's important is that I don't start on this side because I'd make my grid slightly off. I always want to start on the same side. I want to do that 1-inch grid. we go. And then I'm going to connect those lines. So I'm going to do the exact same thing on this side, 1 inch tick marks starting where the photograph starts. When you're working with a ruler, often you'll notice you'll get the edges dirty, and it's nice to keep your ruler clean so that when you do your next project that I don't get red ink all over a beautiful drawing that I'm trying to draw a straight line on. So you can use a wet paper towel, or I am the mother of a toddler, so I have tons of baby wipes floating around. Baby wipes are wonderful and cheap. So I'm just gonna grab baby wipe. So wipe off, you can see I get that kind of, I've got a dirty edge and some of that red ink. So I'm just gonna clean off my edges after I do this, and then the next time I use this ruler, it'll be all clean and I won't get my drawing dirty. Also, if you get charcoal all over your hands, wipes are great for that. Now, the last thing that I want to think about is, because we're going box by box from the photo to the drawing, it can be confusing sometimes and disorienting to know, like, which box am I on when you're in the middle of the face. So I like to letter and number my boxes. So I'm just going to letter across the top. And number across the side. That way, if I'm working on this eye, I know that I'm in box C5, so I can find box C5 on my drawing paper and make sure that I'm actually in the right box. All right, so this is good to go. I would, if I were drawing, I'd probably like tack this up on the wall or put it right next to where I'm drawing so that I can make sure that I have really good access to this. I can see it really easily while I do my drawing. Okay, so after gridding my photograph, I need to grid my piece of drawing paper. Couple things you'll notice, it is bigger than the photograph. So if you have a regular sized ruler, it's not going to go all the way across to make those lines. You're going to need a bigger straight edge. So if you have a yardstick or a long ruler, that's perfect. That's what I have. But if you don't, what you can do is you can use your small ruler to make those tick marks, make those grid lines, and then just use any sort of straight edge. It could be your drawing board, it could be another sheet of paper, anything that's straight to connect those lines and make those lines straight. So since this is our final drawing, we don't want to grid with pen because that's permanent. We want to grid with something that's going to kind of disappear into the charcoal. So we're going to use a kind of charcoal that's called vine charcoal, or sometimes it's called willow charcoal. It can sometimes be fat and it can sometimes be skinny. It doesn't really matter. What matters about this is that it's the lightest, easiest charcoal to erase. So we're going to press lightly so it doesn't make dark marks, and we're going to use this, and it just helps because when we get towards the middle and the end of our drawing, we're going to start erasing these grid lines because they're no longer helpful, and the more they disappear, the more it looks like a nicer finished drawing. So since this is bigger, we're going to double the size of our portraits. So we're going to do 2-inch grid. So I'm just going to grid every 2 inches, and again, I'm trying to like make these lines light as possible so that they're easy to erase. And then I'm gonna do that again down here. Then I'm gonna flip my paper, do the same thing, just going in the other direction. Again, 2-inch grid. I'm gonna clean the edges of this ruler off. And the back, you can see the charcoal made some marks on there. So one thing to be aware of, charcoal is messy. You can see I've made some smudges. It got on my hands. I've sort of wiped that off already. There's like little charcoal dusty things already floating around. So I've put newspaper down because that's a nice little protector and it just makes it easier to clean up after myself. The reality is it's pretty easy to wipe up and it will wash out of your clothes, unless you like really grind it into a white t-shirt. But it's okay to clean up, but it's still nice to have some precautions. So for me, like the newspaper, if the newspaper just gets full of charcoal dust, I can just kind of crumple it up, keep the charcoal dust inside, throw it in the trash or in the recycling. If you've got like those plastic drop cloths or plastic tablecloths, that's another great option. For my clothes, I just like to throw on an apron. I have art aprons. Maybe just don't wear your nicest, prettiest clothes, or be careful if you are wearing those clothes. So now I have a 2-inch grid on this piece of paper. If I count how many boxes I have on this grid versus how many boxes I have on this grid, I actually have extra boxes on my large sheet of paper, and that's not a problem. It's actually going to help me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to designate these boxes on the top and the left as my kind of numbering system, and then I'm going to trim them off at the end. So my drawing will actually start right here, not right here. So so I did letters across the top, so that's A. Great, so I end in H here, I end in H here, and then 1. So you'll notice that 11 is kind of a half sheet, so my piece of paper wasn't perfectly 24 inches long. Depending on what kind of paper you found or ordered, if it's not 24 inches long, you're going to get that half box right there, but it's actually half a box right there as well, so that's not a problem. And if you get a whole box, then you can just kind of draw the half box or do whatever, like eyeball it seems right. So now I am ready to go and ready to do my drawing. Great. Okay, let's take a moment to talk about the different charcoal media. So we've been starting out using vine charcoal or willow charcoal, which makes kind of light marks. Now, actually, that looks very dark because charcoal on the whole is a darker medium. But the thing about vine charcoal is it doesn't like embed itself into the paper very much. It kind of stays on top, and it doesn't release a lot of charcoal, so it's pretty easy to erase. So that's why it makes a really great sketching tool. It doesn't make a good finishing tool. What we're going to be using for finishing is called compressed charcoal. So charcoal, just like at the end of a fire, you have kind of wood turned into black parts. That's what this is. So this is a vine that's been very carefully kind of turned into charcoal. And then this is just a variety of wood that they've sort of broken down. It's a variety of charcoal they've broken down and compressed it into a stick. So it's got a lot more essentially charcoal per little bit. So when you put down a mark, you're leaving a lot more medium on the paper. So you can see when I go like that, I'm spreading a lot more around just because there is a lot more. And if I go to erase it, it's harder to erase. This is actually a good thing because you want your finishing medium to stick to the paper. You want it to adhere and go in good. Also, if I really like push down hard, if you have good compressed charcoal, which if you order this stuff I linked to, should be pretty good. You can get it really just this beautiful rich black, whereas the vine charcoal, you can see it kind of feels a little bit gray. Again, charcoal is messy, so they're kind of leaving all those charcoal bits. You can use your finger or a tissue and kind of move those around. There's a lot of fun to be had with experimenting and like, what do I do with this? You can use a tissue. So here's a paper towel, but Kleenex works great if you kind of like have drawn something in lightly and wanted to smooth it out a little bit. You didn't want that paper texture. You can kind of use that and smooth it out and draw it out a little bit. So you can play around with that a lot. As with any drawing medium, there's certain types that kind of start light and there's certain types that start dark, but you have control over them. So with the vine charcoal, if I press lightly, I can get this really light line, and if I press darker, I can get a darker line. Same thing with the compressed charcoal. If I want a lighter area, I can press lightly. If I want a darker line, I can press darker. So the vine charcoal, the light vine charcoal is the lightest, and the dark compressed charcoal is the darkest, but you can get range in between all of them. Now there's also, if you ordered that pencil set, you're gonna have charcoal pencils, and you'll notice they have a designation as to whether they are light, medium, or dark. So light just means they're a little bit on the harder side. So you can see this one, again, it's a little bit grayer, a little bit lighter, and then dark would mean they're on the softer side. So again, more medium, closer to the compressed charcoal. But again, you can always, like, you can push down more, you can raise up more. And then there's also white charcoal, which you can kind of bring back areas. But if you'll notice, like, I can get some really cool like highlights going on there, but it's still not as light as the paper is. So leaving the paper as your lightest lights is always your best bet. But like if you're drawing an eye and you want to get that reflected light in, the white charcoal is actually a nice way to kind of pop that back in. If you want to like pop a few highlights into your hair, things like that, the white charcoal can be really great for that. All right, the best way always to get to know a medium is to play around with it. Finally, erasers. So this, I asked you to get a kneaded eraser, this gray eraser. It's called a kneaded eraser because you actually want to be kneading it. It's really great stress relief if you want something in your hands. But what an eraser does, this is the kind of eraser you want to work with charcoal because it lifts the charcoal up and absorbs the charcoal. So a white eraser, what it does is it rubs away, but with charcoal you have so much medium on the paper that a white eraser will actually just kind of rub it across and you end up making smears, whereas the kneaded eraser will kind of lift it up and absorb it, and then if an area gets too dark or has too much medium, you just kind of work it into the middle and it sort of absorbs it. So a white eraser will get smaller, and when it's small, it's done. A gray eraser won't get any smaller, it'll just get darker and darker and darker, and then when it reaches the point of kind of you put it down and instead of lifting up the medium, it actually starts to draw on your paper. That's when you know you've used it too much and you just need to throw it away and replace it with a new one. Okay, so to start your drawing, essentially you're going to want to identify like what are the key edges that you want to mark on your paper. So the first thing that we're doing is we're just getting the basic things in the right place. So some of these things will be like the edge of your hair, the edge of where your hair meets your face, your chin line, your eyes, your pupils in your eyes, the irises and the pupils, your eyebrows, the bottom of your nose. If you notice, the nose itself doesn't have like strong lines. So it's really kind of the bottom of the nose where the nostrils are and where it curves around that. The lip is another thing we want to work on. Lips, the more important thing is actually that line in the middle where your two lips meet. If you notice, like especially on the bottom lip, you really can't see a line where the lip and the skin kind of differentiate. It's harder to see, but that middle line is actually what defines the character of your smile and your expression. So a couple of things like shoulders, clothes, things like that. So we're just going to get started, and I just kind of like to go across the top. I may smudge my arm all the way across all this charcoal, and that's okay. If I'm really worried about that, I can take a piece of paper and kind of flip it under, and that'll protect my arm, but I'm not. I can take a shower, I can wash my hands. All those things are good. So I'm just going to start, and when I go, so box 1A is empty. I'm going to leave it empty. 1B is empty, 1C is empty, and my hairline starts to come up with 1D. So 1D. And I notice, and it just kind of comes up like this. So I'm looking at this edge. It starts about right there, ends right there. And then with 1E, it sort of curves around top and ends there. So we're going to kind of create a little bit more of a curve and end there. And then 1F, it just kind of comes through. And G and H are empty, so we're going to leave them empty. So now I'm going to go across 2. A and B are pretty much empty, so I'm going to go with C. Now you notice I've got some like highlights on my hair, so I actually have kind of 2 edges of my hair. I'm just going to worry about the dark stuff right now, and I can bring out those highlights later on after I've added the background in. So I'm going to identify, part of the trick of this is just knowing like what line am I drawing. So I'm going to be drawing that dark line. So it comes through right here and comes up almost to the beginning, and then it just sort of connects right there. And I've got some lines going on in the middle of my hair. I'll worry about those later on. So I'm just going to look at that kind of the edge of my head. And then if I go across, it comes down here through F, and then it just comes down through G. So I'm starting to get the top of my head going. Now, if it's nice for you, you can keep going across, because in 3, I'm going to start getting some more of those headlines, or sorry, where the hair meets the face. But sometimes if I am actually doing this, what I like to do is I like to take a line and just kind of keep following it through and keep referencing the boxes. So if I were to continue this line down, it goes about halfway through G3. And then when I hit 4, it goes down, and then I get kind of a curl that comes out, and then G5 kind of goes back in again, and then H5, it comes out a little bit, and then H6, I get another curl going in and out, same through H7, and then another curl through the 8, and it kind of, that curl ends right there. And then I get my shoulders coming out through H9. So I'm on H9, correct, double check that, and then my shoulder comes out there. And I can do the same thing over here, where in B3, kind of I get a little curl going on there, and then it comes out through B4, and it comes out through B5 and actually comes into A6 and 7. And then I have another one coming out in 8, goes through. There's kind of a curl right here. And then in 9, again, my shoulder comes over halfway and it's there. So that's one way to do it. I'll keep kind of moving my way across for those of you who are a little more methodical, and you can see how that looks. So this kind of comes here. So if I'm going across line 3 now, Oops, so I messed it up. I actually kept this in D, but it goes around to C, so I'm gonna come over here and then keep this more through D, and then here's E. So again, like I kind of was starting to shift things over a little bit, so it's really good to keep double checking. Come down to 4. It's really nice when you can see where the lines kind of hit those corners, because that can be really helpful. So I realized I ended this a little bit early. This comes down over here, and then my jaw goes up over here. Now you can see this line is a little bit awkward, like kind of clunky, so I can just like sort of smooth it out a little bit, and that'll help. All right, let's look at my left eye. Going to start, so I'm going to ignore the eyebrow and do the eye. Now one thing to notice is my head is slightly tilted, so it means my eyes are going to be at an angle. So I like to start with the edge, those dots, kind of, and then draw the curves above and below, so that this end is right on that line between B and C and right in the middle of 5. So B and C right in the middle of 5. So it's really close to the edge of my head. And then this, I've got kind of a line that comes down, and it's like on the line between C and D, and it's a little bit lower. And that is curve of the top of my head, but actually that's kind of like my eyelid, so my eye is actually coming down here, and then this part kind of curves like that. So eyes are very often almond shape, but the weird thing is my eyeball goes up here a little bit and kind of comes in here a little bit. So some of what we're looking at is I've got a couple lines up here that are actually the crease. I've got a dark line, which is my eyelashes. I've got where the skin meets the eyeball, and then the curve of the eyeball itself. And then because my eyes are pretty wide open, you can actually see the curve of the iris. It's a perfect circle, but it gets cut off up here, but it sits down here pretty nicely, and I just barely see that edge. And then this edge comes about halfway through. Now I'm not going to worry about all the details in the middle. If I can get that kind of iris circle in, always remember your iris is a perfect circle. It's just part of it can be covered by your eyelid. So I feel like that's a good placeholder for now. I'm going to put the eyebrow in, so it seems to kind of start here, go up a little, and then come down the angle I'm at, sort of an inquisitive eyebrow right there. And I actually have a little mole up there, which is probably what's contributing. And then I'm going to start in on the second eye. So that second eye is in D, and it's kind of the lower corner of D5. So lower corner of D5, that's my one dot on one side. And again, that's where the crease comes, and then this right inside of that is actually where the eyeball, or the eyeball starts. And then, and I think I need to move these both up just a little bit. There should be kind of a line that goes between your eyes. because my eye doesn't go below this line at all. And then that comes there. So I've got, again, 2 lines. I'm going to make that almond shape. Everyone's eyes are like some sort of almond shape, but like slightly different. So pay attention to, like, is it more curved on this side? Is it more curved on this side? Where is it flat? Where does it maybe go in a little bit? So it comes here. And then again, where is that iris sitting? And all of this is kind of flexible. So when I get my nose in, I'm gonna wanna step back and kind of actually take a look at, do the eyes look right? You know, or do they sit together? You wanna make sure everything kind of sits together on the same face. So I might like raise this up a little bit. Use my gummy eraser to kind of take out marks I don't like. So now they sort of fit together a little bit better. Put my eyebrow in. It doesn't go above this line, but it does come over here. And it does come over here. And I think the reality is I need to bring this over more, just a little bit. So I'm kind of constantly adjusting. This one I'm going to bring out just a little bit and over just a little bit. And that kind of comes in like that. Okay, I'm going to look a little alien-esque because my pupils are white. So until you fill in your pupils, that just happens, and that's okay. And if it bugs you, you can kind of slowly fill that in. The reality is, though, like, you don't want to do too much with the vine charcoal because we want to go over everything with the compressed charcoal, because the vine charcoal just doesn't have the oomph that the compressed charcoal does. So when I'm doing my nose, I'm actually just going to focus on the bottom part. I'm not going to focus. There's this line down the middle where the light and the dark meet. And then there's this like invisible triangle that we always think of as the edges of our nose. But the reality is, like, it's light here and it's dark here. And that's what we're more worried about. So I'm going to come down here where I see the edge of my nostril. So that's in C6. So C6. And it kind of comes over and it kind of comes straight down. That might be a little too high, but again, I can kind of just erase that. I've got these marks there. And then I've got nostrils that go across this. And then sort of the bump of my nose is down there. And then this nostril, and then this edge comes up before over here. So again, my head is shifted. So this side of the nose is coming out into, like, I can look, it should come out into my eyeball, whereas this in the iris, whereas this side of my nose is coming out just kind of right here. So I'm going to bring that out a little bit more. Bring my nostril out a little bit more. And then bring this nostril over a little bit. Kind of bring that out. So that's starting to get, you can start to see kind of the shift of, and so my nose kind of just has this like boop bottom. So pay attention, is your nose wide? Is it thin? Is this curve like very curvy? Does it come all the way in, or is it kind of more straight? Like mine are a little bit more straight up and down. So take a look at that. That goes down a little bit. And then with my mouth, and again, like if you start fussing around, it can be really good to kind of erase some of the lines that you don't mean, because then you aren't confused by them later on. Okay. Like I said, I'm getting this all over my arm. No big deal. I can wash it off. I'm starting to create smudges. Again, no big deal. Like that's not going to come through in the final project, the final piece. All right, so my mouth, I'm gonna start with the two corners. This corner is in C7, just right in the middle of C7. So boom, right in the middle of C7. This corner is in E7. It's about on the same level, but it's closer to over here. And then this is where the smile comes in. That line in the middle is the one that actually sort of goes down and then goes in a little bit, but it doesn't go down that much. Okay, I think this is a little bit lower, yeah. Again, because my head is tilted, so this side should be higher than this side. And then I'm gonna look at the top of the lip. I'm gonna kind of add that, and it sort of comes up and then it goes down there, it comes up and it kind of goes down here. And I really got, this is kind of where the cheek is. And then I can kind of, again, it's kind of hard to see that bottom lip, and I can really only see like half of it. So I'm only gonna draw in half of it. And then I've got my chin line down here, which is in number 8. And it kind of starts just barely in C, and it goes into D a little bit. I've got, I think this is a dimple over here. It's a little bit hard to tell if it's hair or dimple, but it's dark. Sometimes if you're frustrated and you're like, I don't know if that's A, B, or C part, is that hair or is it dimple? The reality is it doesn't matter, because if it's dark here, you're gonna wanna draw it dark. And if it's light on here, you're gonna wanna draw it light. And so that's actually what matters, is just looking at what's light, what's dark, not what is this thing I think it is. Like, are you frustrated that you can't see the bottom of your lip over here? Well, it doesn't matter. If you can't see it on here, you don't wanna draw it on here. All right, so those are like, essentially I've got all the key landmarks in. Now, I can continue to go in, and I might do it with my hair a little bit, especially down here, kind of like mark some of the things out. It really depends on what you're comfortable with. Like, I would be comfortable going into this and starting to do the compressed charcoal with what I have here. This is enough. But if it's not enough for you, then like continue to add some details as it's helpful. What's really important at this stage is that I step back. So you're gonna hear some crinkling as so I've been sitting so I don't get my head in the picture, but I'm gonna stand up and kind of step back and do sort of a big picture. Does anything look super off? Does it kind of, so this kind of juts out a little bit. So I'm gonna sort of soften this edge just a little bit more, even though like my head is angled. I'm just gonna kind of, and as I erase this, if I start to erase grid, like that's actually okay too. So remember with, oops, I just made my Vine charcoal too, no big deal. With the gummy eraser, you kind of lift and then you smudge it in. Okay, so I can continue to sort of adjust things as seems like necessary.